So many, many years ago, eons ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I had my very first clergy mentor outside of the actual church that I was working in. And she was brilliant. The more I look back on my relationship with her, the more I know how brilliant she was. Her name was Colleen. And because I was switching from the track that I had been in the Methodist Church, deacon, going to elder, they put me with a female elder to be my person who was my mentor. And so one day, as I was talking to her, I was bemoaning the fact that I just could not get into this Emmaus thing that everybody kept talking about. In that denomination, there is a program called the Walk to Emmaus. Now, I'm not going to slam that program. I'm just going to tell you that at that time, I couldn't get into it because there were lots of rules. You had to be interviewed, and you had to do certain things, and you had to commit to certain things. And once you were interviewed, they would then discern, the interview committee would discern whether or not you were the right kind of person to take this kind of experience, to go to this kind of program. And you know me, I'm just not that into exclusivity, right? So I was moaning, and you can put whatever word you want in front of that, and moaning, to Colleen about that, at the exclusivity of it. And then I said to her, and then, you know what, they won't even tell you what happens at that thing. It's all secret. It's like this little secretive society, like they got their own little hoods and stuff that they won't tell anybody about. And so she let me do that over the course of about 6 months. Complain about the fact that I could not get into this thing that everybody was talking about. And the good thing about it was, you know, if you did this, you got your own little butterfly to wear on your shirt to show that you were part of the in crowd. And she said, so the next time I went, and she said, wait, before you even start to talk about Emmaus, I found a quote that I would like you to read out loud to me. Okay, so I'm an adult, and she's an adult, and I'm thinking she wants me to read a quote out loud to her. And so she hands me a piece of paper, and she says, please, let's just meditate on this quote together. It's from Frederick Buechner. Now, some folks might know who Frederick Buechner is. Frederick Buechner is a famous Presbyterian minister, and he's written, 30 books on life and religion and spirituality and all of that sort of stuff. And so she goes, I would like you to read this Buechner quote, and let's just meditate on it for a while. So she hands me the paper, and she goes, please just read out loud. So I start to read, and I said, Emmaus is whatever we do or wherever we go to make ourselves forget that the world holds nothing sacred, where we spend much of our lives, you and I, that place that we go in order to escape, a bar, a movie, wherever it is that we throw up our hands and say, let the whole darn thing go hang. It makes no difference anyway. But there are some things that even in Emmaus we cannot escape. We can escape our troubles, at least for a while. We can escape the job we did not get or the friend we hurt. We can even escape for a while the awful suspicion that life makes no sense and that the religion of Jesus is just a lot of wishful thinking. But the one thing we cannot escape is life itself. And I looked at her and I said, oh. And she goes, yeah, you see, maybe you don't want to go to Emmaus. Maybe what you want to do is, like those two who finally realized in Emmaus that Jesus was with them there, turn around and go back out into the world and start getting some things done rather than complaining and moaning. That's been a lesson that I think I return to in my life a lot. I return to that lesson of not getting stuck in that place where I can just forget that the world is hurting all the time. My favorite place would probably be television. Anybody get lost from the world in television? Yeah. Over this course of this week where I've been sick, I have turned off MSNBC and CNN because I just felt like I was getting sicker as I continued to watch the world. So I just turned on Hallmark Channel movies. Now, can I just say, if you want to get lost in the world, go watch Hallmark Channel. And it occurred to me last night that probably one of the reasons why I'm the happiest in my life during November and December is because the Christmas movies start in October and I stop worrying about the world. I just let it go, right? But I can't stay there. Anybody get lost in shopping? Some of us get lost in shopping. That's our Emmaus. Some of us get lost in things like food. Some of us get lost in things like just never being present whenever anybody is around us. We just check out in our mind and we're not there. The next cause, the next thing, the next big deal in the world, we get lost in those things, you see, because the pain for us is too much to handle. And when Luke was writing this particular portion of the gospel, Jesus had been gone for over 40 years. Did you know that? And they're still in pain. They're in pain because the temple has fallen in 70, and this is probably written somewhere in the early 80s, 85 at the latest maybe. They're still in pain, and Jesus has been gone for 40 years, and they're already still in pain. And he writes this story about how these two disciples are trying to escape everything that they have seen that weekend that they took the pilgrimage from their home village into Jerusalem for the Passover. He writes and says, they're walking away from all of that mess. They're turning and going that direction. Little did they know that they were just going to be the next couple that Jesus was playing hide and go seek with. You know, it's amazing to me how these stories after the resurrection, Jesus is like, sure, I'm hiding beside you. You don't even know that I'm here. And the minute that you recognize him, poof, he's gone. You know, he's out of the way. You know, fun game for Jesus maybe. I don't know if it was so fun for his disciples who were so freaked out and so upset and so worried, so frightened by what was going on in their lives. And it occurred to me as I was researching this week for this particular message this morning, that our sermon series about messiness and messy people around Jesus is probably never going to end. Even if I go on to another subject, or even if we go on to anything else, probably that sermon series about the messiness that Jesus involved himself in the world is our human condition. That's another word that Buechner liked to use, human condition. Our human condition is messy. And when it gets too much for us, we get on the road walking to the place that will take us away from it. And when we're on that road where we're trying to escape, we can't see that Jesus is right beside us. Now, I find it interesting that we don't know much about these two disciples. They're not the Big 12, okay? They're not any of the 11 left. There's no indication that that's who they are. They were people who were following Jesus throughout the crowd, right? Following him from the fringes. Had heard of him probably and wanted to see what was going on with this one. But what they're doing, walking away from the work, walking away from the mess, is so important to Jesus that he chases them down. He goes to find them. He's already stopped off with Mary and says to her, "Why are you weeping?" You know, he's already stopped off in the upper room and Thomas has said, "I don't believe it, let me touch the hands." You know, he's already gone there with the original ones. And now he's after these two that we don't know anything really about in the scripture. And he's asking them about what their life is like. We're leaving all that behind. They say, don't you know? Don't you know what has happened? We're leaving all of that behind and we're escaping into the midst of something else that will take our minds off of that. We have done that a lot more, I think, since 2001. Since September 11th, 2001, I think this country has done a lot more escape in our lives. And I think that we have become perfected at it in some ways, where we can escape what's going on around us. Now, please hear me when I say this. It's not bad that we take what time we need to recoup ourselves when we are in need of that recouping. I think what we find out when we listen to this Emmaus story is that Jesus really says to them, take some time, but I need you to go back and start fixing that mess that is created out there. You can tell that since 2001, this country has changed so much because what we do is we try to find the ways to escape from the pain, and we don't really deal with the pain. So these two guys finally make it to Emmaus, and Jesus is going to leave them and go on ahead. I guess he's got some other disciples somewhere he's going to chase down and say, hey, what are you doing? And they convince him to stay, and they still don't know who he is. They talk later about, oh yeah, I had kind of an inkling that who he was, But they don't know who he is until he goes to the table and sits down with them. And when he breaks the bread with them, then they realize that he's the risen Christ. Then they realize that in this whole time, they've been in the presence of Jesus, and he's gone. And they're so aware at that moment that it says they get up immediately and they return to Jerusalem. In other words, they return to Jerusalem where all of the pain is. They leave their escape and they go to the place where the pain is. It occurs to me that he has taught them the two things that we really need in our lives to deal with the pain that we might experience. We don't need television. We don't need shopping. We don't need alcohol. We don't need food. We need communion and community to deal with those things in this world that are causing so much pain and so much trouble. We need communion and community. More and more every day, I see people complaining online about the fact that the reason why the world is so bad is because we're all separated from one another. The older generation likes to blame the younger generation for having their faces in their phones, right? Oh, they just are shutting us out. Have you ever had a conversation with a younger person, truly had a conversation with a younger person? There are times, I do it myself, there are times when they're trying to talk to us and we will shut them down because we don't think they have any experience about what life is. So why would they want to talk to any of us? Why would they want to talk to us when all we want to do is tell them how to do it and make sure that they end up just like us, right? Why would they want to talk to us? But we are separating ourselves as a community. We are taking ourselves out of communion with one another. And the reason why, my friends, is because all of us are carrying pain. All of us are carrying something in our hearts and our souls that are making us seek out being in our hiding place. If we truly want to change the world, if we want this world to become this place where everybody knows what the world is around them and knows it as peace and grace and love, we've got to change how we do community. Now, I'm going to probably make some people mad here. I'm going to make some people mad. That's okay. I'm up for that. But I think every single solitary thing that we do as a community is great, but I want us to really examine how, isn't it wonderful that we give a meal to folks who are in need, and then what do we do after we give those folks that meal? We do the dishes, shut out the lights, lock the doors, and go home. right? We go home where it's safe. We go home where it's nice, where we've got all the food we want. We don't have any continuity, you see there, between realizing that we're feeding a person and what they need next. Think about this. It's really wonderful. It really is wonderful that we collect coats and clothing and all of that sort of stuff for folks, and we give that out into this world. But the next step beyond that is to ask ourselves the question, why do they need clothing? Why? Because we're not caring for the community. Everything that we do, everything that we can ask ourselves, everything that we participate in this world, has some longer reach into a system that is created in this world that we're not really doing anything to change. And every time we walk down the road to go hide in our hiding places because all of that is just too much to think about, Jesus is walking right along with us, trying to remind us that we need community and communion to be able to address those things. You see, the problems for those two disciples were in Jerusalem. That's where the seat of power was. The seat of power was in Jerusalem. That's where the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were so corrupted by Rome, resided. They were there. They were taking over during Jesus' time. And we have to be willing to walk toward that which is truly creating the problems in this world, if we're ever going to get this Emmaus story. I have another quote that Buechner said. I believe that whether we recognize him or not, or believe in him or not, or even know his name, again and again he comes to us and walks a little ways along whatever road we're following. And I believe that through something that happens to us, or something we see, or somebody we know, who can ever guess how or when or where, he offers us the way he did at Emmaus, the bread of life, offers us new hope, a new vision of light that not even the dark world can overcome. Last week I asked you, do you believe? Do you believe that we can overcome the grave? Do you believe that we can overcome, with God's help, anything? That's where we start. We start with this belief, this thought. Whether we can prove it or not, it doesn't really make any difference. We believe in it. We start with this belief that we can overcome the darkness of this world. We don't have to walk away from the mess and leave it there for somebody else to deal with. We can turn around and walk toward it and start to address those evils in this world that keep the people down. We can walk toward those things and address those systems that keep people homeless and hungry and out of work and angry and filled with animosity and afraid. We can do that if we but recognize that Christ is feeding us hope, and Christ is feeding us love, and Christ has called us into a greater community than ourselves and our own very, very coveted needs in this world. But to do that, we have to believe. The resurrection time in a church year is always the time of year when you ask yourselves, what do I believe? Do I believe that we can overcome? Do I believe that God is giving me everything I need to overcome the fear of the world? Do I believe that the risen Christ is right beside me every step of the way? That's our work, and that's our challenge, to address those questions so that we can get to the next question, which is, why is this world still hurting? It's not 40 years after Christ died for us. It's 2,000 years after Christ died for us. Why is this world still hurting? Amen.